Chalo, start Manju. Then I will welcome Abhishek formally.
Hello, yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Today's topic is a very different topic and a very fascinating one because we don't know much about birds, but then again, it is a part of nature and related to our plants and flowers, which we are so fond of. So today, Bandana has arranged for this lovely talk by Mr. Abhishek Gulshan, and I request Bandana to introduce Abhishek ji, and then we start our session for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manju. Abhishek, are you there?
Of course, I'm here.
Yes, sir. You've been waiting. I'm sorry to have made you wait for 10 minutes.
No, not at all.
But it's really a pleasure to have you here, Abhishek. And as Manju said, हम लोगों को ज्यादा पता नहीं है चिड़ियों के बारे में, except कि भाई हाँ रोज पार्क में देख लेते हैं, सवेरे देख लेते हैं, शाम को देख लेते हैं. So we're really looking forward to getting to recognize birds, understand birds, and learn a lot from you. And everybody, so please welcome Abhishek. हम अभिषेक को बहुत ज्यादा समय से तो नहीं जानते हैं, लेकिन जितना जानते हैं उसमें पता चलता है कि he is a very passionate naturalist. और हम मिले कैसे अभिषेक से, और एटलीस्ट पता कैसे चला, I want to share that with you. Manju and I had gone to the Okla Bird Sanctuary, and we were looking for somebody who would be able to guide us about birds. And that is where we got the reference of Abhishek. So when somebody refers a person to you, you know that they already come in high regard. And when I spoke with Abhishek, he said, "नहीं, Okla तो अभी हम foreign नहीं आ रहे हैं." But from that day onwards, which is barely what 2-3 months ago, Manju, or maybe 6 months back, right?
Three months back, yeah.
3 months ago, और तब से we've been constantly in touch. And Abhishek has this beautiful, very interesting group called Ninox, Ninox. How do we pronounce it, Abhishek?
It's pronounced as Ninox.
Ninox. I knew I was doing something wrong. Okay, so Ninox, which is, it's a pun. So it's owl about nature or all about nature. So the name itself is different. It's quirky. So I guess that gives you an insight into Abhishek. Okay, now apart from being a naturalist, he is a nature educator, which is the most important thing for us, because that is where FSN and what Abhishek does meet beautifully. He's also a travel specialist, and of course, he's an avid bird watcher. There is tons and tons I have about Abhishek. I'm just going to tell you a few things which really resound with us. What he does is, and what his goal is, to bring citizens closer to nature, right? And sensitize them towards the environment, which is what we do at FSN also. We do it through flowers, other things, flowers, plants, etc. Abhishek, does it through lots of things, but the main thing is birds. Founder of Ninox, I told you about. And what Ninox does, apart from everything else, is have on-field programs and experiences where actually you go and do bird watching. And you don't need to have a whole lot of equipment, which is what I'd asked Abhishek. कि हमारे पास तो वो लंबा वाला कैमरा भी नहीं है, वो बहुत बड़ी सी कोई भी बड़ी चीजें नहीं है. Just as an ordinary citizen can I go? So he said, you're more than welcome, and you won't feel the lack of equipment at all, right? So I think there's a bird walk coming up to Mangar or something like Abhishek will tell us about it. Now, apart from Ninox, he's formerly been a program head for, he's led a program called Eco Trails with WWF. All of us have heard of WWF, and we know that he's a naturalist associated with them. He's also a Delhi NCR reviewer for Eat Birds, a Cornell University initiative where they monitor rare and unusual sightings of birds in the region. See, I know that in the Times of India and Hindustan Times, I've been thinking, abhi itni sari butterflies dikhi, abhi ye birds dikhi. So now you know that people, Abhishek, who are behind all those beautiful things that we read about. And Abhishek, at the end of the program, we'd like to ask you whether we can be part of some kind of a study also. I don't know whether normal people can be part of studies, but I'm sure you'll be able to guide us about that. Now, he's the author of a weekly column, In My Backyard. This he'd been doing for last year for Hindu. And this is what he's going to share with us today. birds in my backyard. So what we are looking at is कि अभिषेक के बताने के बाद all of us will become experts. अच्छा ये कौन सी चिड़िया है, अच्छा ये कौन सी चिड़िया है, इसकी चोंच ऐसी क्यों है, इसके पर ऐसे क्यों है, ये क्या खाती है. At least we'll know much more about the other people in a family. Okay, he has been covered by many prestigious magazines, some of which are Nat Geo, the Traveler India magazine, Week magazine, and he guides journalists nationwide in helping find solutions to address conservation issues. That also sounds familiar as to what we do at FSN. And he consults with several reputed conservation-based organizations, as we talked about earlier, the WWF and Round Glass Society. And to end with it, I will just say that he works towards realizing the dream of sustainable development and responsible tourism. That's the most beautiful statement. I mean, in these days especially. So Abhishek, I welcome you, or rather FSN welcomes you, and I hand over the mic to you to take us through the birds of our backyard. And folks, I think Vivek is going to put all our mics off, and at the end of the session, we'll have the floor open to ask any questions from Abhishek. Thank you.
Wow, now I realize that I've sent you a bit too much about me. Anyway.
अभी तो हमने कुछ भी नहीं बोला है, 4 लाइनें बोली हैं. हमारे पास तो पूरा I think 10-15 पन्ने हैं आपके बारे में बताने के लिए. So
thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
You have to do a great job.
Thank you so much, Vandana. So I'm going to just sorry. Yeah. So I'm just going to start the presentation, so I just like to know, as Vandana said, that they're going to mute everyone till the end of the session. But there are a few interactive slides in there, so I won't mind a little interaction with everyone today. We do have a little time since we started about 10-15 minutes late. I'm expecting that I'll get 10-15 minutes more for this. Anyway, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen and we'll start off from there.
Just one second. So, Vivek, you'll know how you'll be able to handle that whenever there are interactive slides, then we'll have to unmute people, right? If that is what Abhishek wants.
Yeah, we can do that. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not too much, but yes, a little interaction will be much better than just me taking a formal lecture with every one of you. So, okay. So today, so as Vandana said, that I'm the founder of a firm called Ninox, Owl About Nature. So the basic goal of Ninox is basically familiarizing people with their own surroundings, rather than, because a lot of people have this misconception that if you want to see wildlife, you'll have to go to all these jungle spaces, wilder spaces, in order to experience the wilderness. But that's not really true, because Delhi NCR as a region is very blessed with flora as well as fauna. I don't have to explain flora to you, since you're the Floriculture Society of Noida, so you would know much more than what I do as far as plants are concerned. But other than that, I just like to say that I worked with the Hindu, not worked with them, but I had a weekly column with them for over a year and 4 months. And the day the editor called it off, I said, I have much more to say. So you can imagine, if I can go on for a year and 4 months without sweating, then you could actually guess how rich our own region must be when it comes to just our backyard. Okay. So I'm just going to start from there. But today, the topic at hand is urban avian biodiversity or diversity. We are just going to talk about certain winged creatures, which are birds. So my love affair started back in 2011 with birds. But before that, I am a football buff. So I had gone to Kolkata to see Argentina versus Venezuela. And that is when I was traveling with a friend of mine who was into wildlife rescue. So he said, there is a nature camp happening nearby. So would you like to go? I said, we're here for 1 week. We can't keep eating food. As you can see that I love food. So basically, I accepted the invitation for that nature camp, and the first subject that I had seen was a snake. And the best thing was that I wasn't spooked. So the thing was that I suddenly fell in love with snakes, and I decided that I'll go back to Delhi and I'll start looking for snakes, and I'll possibly study snakes a bit. I had absolutely no clue what snakes were. I only knew they were reptiles and nothing beyond that, really. So this was in September, October, and I didn't realize when I went back home, I started looking for snakes and I didn't get any. I didn't find any, and I was wondering what's wrong. Is Delhi really that poor in fauna? Is it really true? And that wasn't the case. I was looking at snakes in the wrong season because snakes go into partial hibernation during winters. I couldn't find any, so that was really my fault and not the snakes and not Delhi's entirely. So I thought, since it's winters, I'll look for a much more regular subject. So I came across birds, and everybody knew that birds have a wide migration pattern during winters. So, and it'll be easier for me to see birds rather than snakes, who are not as confiding as birds. Anyway, so that's where it all started. So here, to reiterate my point, so birds are exactly everywhere. They are the most seen subjects around us, the most seen animals around us. Other than that, we do have a few insects around us, but honestly, a lot of people don't like creepy crawlies. So that's why they're not very interested in this. That's why they don't really dwell on seeing them. And being birds, they are one of the most colorful subjects in the world, and that's one of the main reasons why we like them as well. Anyway, so just to start off here, that birds are everywhere, so it becomes one of the most regular subjects for us to see, and that's what catches my attention because in order to save wildlife, in order to conserve wildlife, in order to conserve our own surroundings, it's very important to pay attention to what all plants are around us and what all birds are around us and what all other animals are around us, because all this is part of a very delicate system. If even one of them gets affected, then the entire system takes the brunt of it. Anyway, so there are about 10,000 different kinds of birds in the world, 10,000 different species of birds in the world. How to look for birds? Would anyone like to tell me how do they look for birds? Anyone could answer that question. Hi, is
I
can
guess we
everyone
don't
hear me?
look, Abhishek, I think we don't look for birds. They are seen, and by their chirping and their sounds, we are attracted to them, and that's how we,
Correct.
see.
So the two of the major senses that we use are these. One
Yeah.
is that we use our eyes to look at them if they are visible, of course. And the other one, which I think is most important, are your ears, because like every one of us, some of us are very bold and confident. Some of us are shy and a little elusive in nature. It's a similar case with birds. A lot of urban species are very confiding, are very bold, very confident. They will come out, they will not be scared of human beings. But there are a lot of other birds that might be very shy. So for these birds, it's very important to actually listen. And who would know better? I mean, who would know better than me? Because when I start walking with friends, and if there is a bird around us who is actually singing, then honestly, I forget about my friends around me because I listen to them every day, right? I listen to my friends every day, and it's really nice listening to birds, hearing them sing. And there are a lot of birds that sing really nicely. Of course, there are a lot of birds that don't sing very nicely, like crows, etc. But I know of a few people who love crows and their sounds, which is very strange to me. But I've grown to accept my friends as well. Anyway, so here we use two major senses of ours, ears as well as eyes. And for me as a naturalist, I would say your ears are the most important because you might not be able to see a bird, you might not be able to see a creature, but you can certainly hear them sing or hear their movements, etc., their flapping. So all these things are very important in basically locating birds or looking at them. What is a bird? It is a warm-blooded animal that, the three very important points that you would all know, but I'm just going through them. Has feathers, lays hard-shelled eggs, has a beak but no teeth. So these three features majorly define what birds are. Of course, there are more scientific ways of approaching the subject, but at the same time, I think these three things, if you remember them, it definitely uh, defines a particular animal for you, and in this case, that's birds. Okay, so where to look for birds? What's a habitat? Now, as human beings, we have a lot of needs and requirements, and it's very similar to what birds have because we need food. They also need food. We need water. They do as well. Cover as well as space. A lot of people get confused between cover and space, and I'd like to address that because I think food and water is fairly well explanatory, and you can really understand from wherever I'm coming from. But as far as cover and space goes, that is something that I'd like to elaborate on a little more. So when I say cover, it basically means safe spaces or places for birds to live in, for birds to roost in, for birds to nest in, and also to basically stay safe somewhere. Like for example, for us, it's our home, it's our house, and space is basically all work and no play makes someone a dull boy or a girl. So similarly with the birds, they also need a lot of space to move around. And fortunately, Delhi NCR is quite rich when it comes to tree spaces as well as other different kinds of habitats and microhabitats that help birds cater to the needs of the space. And so that they have enough place to move around from tree to tree, from habitat to habitat, if they are that kind of bird. Anyway, so just to explain these two things, I think now it should be fairly clear because a lot of people get confused between cover and space, which they feel are two same things, but that's not the case. They're very, very different. Okay, let's come to the actual part of the presentation, that is identification. Uh, Whatever we have done till now are very common subjects or very common topics that you can easily read online. So, but for this, Uh, I'd like to go into details as far as identification is concerned because that is something that you won't find in books entirely. And we will be talking about a few nuggets here and there that you will certainly not find in books. They come from very personal experiences of naturalists. Okay, you no longer have to guess. So, few things that one might want to remember. You can take screenshot if you want, or you can write it down if you want. First is the size and shape, which we will call SS. Then you have the color pattern. You have habit oblique behavior. Then you have call oblique song. Then you have habitat. Habitat can be variable, but in this case, we're going to focus on one habitat, which is our urban habitat. Basically, concrete plus a few trees. Basically, urban settlements is what we are going to focus on here. So all the different kinds of, all these points will actually help you identify certain birds. For example, uh, let's talk about this. When we talk about sizes, I'm not expecting anyone here. Uh, like for example, if I ask you a question, what was the size of the bird that you had seen? You are certainly not going to say कि 5-6 inch की थी या 13 centimeters की थी या you will not be exact with its size, right? And so, what I'm really expecting when I ask you this question, what was the size of the bird? You could always tell me that it was either a sparrow-sized bird, or it could be a myna-sized bird, or it could be a crow-sized bird, or it could be an eagle or a kite-sized bird. That is something that helps you uh, maintain a mental image of the size of the bird and the basic comparison between the bird that you had seen and these birds sets a sort of a benchmark for you to remember sizes. And that is exactly what I'm trying to explain via this slide. Like, for example, tomorrow Bandana messages me on WhatsApp that we saw a bird, we don't know what it is, but I can explain a little as to how it looked. I said, fine. The first question that I will ask her is what does she think was the size of a particular bird? Now, she's obviously not going to tell me in centimeters and inches, but she's certainly going to tell me in the ways that she would understand, or that I would understand, saying that it was the size of a crow, or it was the size of a myna, something like that. So it helps you remember what kind of birds you're really looking at. Okay, and even the minor shape of a particular bird can tell you what family it belongs to. And to aid this statement, we are going to play a little game, which is this. We're going to talk about. Bandhana, can you remove the drawings on the slides?
You know, somebody's debate. Can we stop people being able to write on the screen?
I don't think you can stop them, but you can.
I hear somebody, I think by mistake, somebody's drawing on the screen. Okay, guys, everybody, please. Okay, he's done the clearly.
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah. Anyway, let's carry on.
Okay.
I didn't want to reveal the slide, but it's revealed now. Anyway,
I don't think
so as far as bird groups go, they have definite shapes, and there are many different types of birds. So let's look at a few shapes that we're going to discuss. And this is more of an interactive slide, so I can request everyone to unmute themselves. I'm going to take one shape at a time, and I would like you to guess what kind of bird it could be. You don't have to give me an exact identification of the bird, yeah, but you could just tell me that if you feel it's a type of pigeon, if it's a myna, if it's a crow, or whatever you'd like.
Vivek, would you like to unmute everybody? Vivek, are you there? Because I think everybody is still muted.
Okay, the first one is this.
Just 1 second, Abhishek.
Sure.
Saying that she can't, the sound is not very clear.
Just hold on. So
Is it clear for everyone else?
I'll mute everyone. I'll mute everyone and then unmute.
Okay. Oh yeah, wonderful. Now everybody's unmuted. Okay.
This is the first shape that you're going to talk about. You can pay attention to the prop which is near the bird, and you could guess what kind of bird this could be. Vandana, would you like to start as an example?
What kind of a bird meaning? Somebody that feeds on insects, or maybe it's
You could just tell me the type of the bird.
The size of the bird?
Type.
Woodpecker,
Okay.
woodpecker.
Okay,
Correct.
size would be, sorry, somebody's answered. Okay.
Not size, type, Vandana. Type.
Type of bird. Now, I think it's pecking at the wood. So it's some kind of a woodpecker or an insect eating bird.
Yes, it is a kind of a woodpecker. So the prop, which is a bark or a twig of a tree, helps you identify it. And also the general behavior of clinging onto the bark in that position. Okay, because generally birds don't do that. Most of the barbets will do it, and the woodpeckers will do it, and maybe the parakeets will do it. Other than that, none of the other birds sit on twigs like this. They generally sit upright and not slanting or drooping or anything of that sort. Anyway, the second one is this. I'm sorry. Yeah, the second one is this.
Pigeon. Pigeon and
Yes, a
this
pigeon.
is a pigeon.
Right. A pigeon or a dove is something that you can relate to when you see this shape, right? Okay. What about this?
Sparrow. Sparrow.
Koyal.
Okay. So
Bulbul.
basically, okay. The general type would be
Head is up, but singing bird.
Singing
Head is
bird.
up.
Yeah.
correct. Absolutely right.
Singing bird. Yeah.
What about this?
Crow.
This is a crow.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you guys are right. Crows, woodpeckers, songbirds, and pigeons and doves. So basically, what does the slide really tell you? a lot of times what happens when you're outbird watching, or let's say you're not even outbird watching, but you're standing in your balcony trying to look at something or just sipping on your tea, you might come across a bird that is possibly flying away from you, or it's possibly sitting in a light which is basically just a shadow or against light, and you are not able to see the proper colors of the birds. So looking at shapes is something that can help you decide what kind of bird it could be. Maybe it will not land you at the exact identification of the bird, but it will certainly help you identify the family. Okay, we're going to carry on this.
Parakeet.
Parrot,
Owl.
parrot.
Owl and parakeet.
Parrot and owl.
Okay,
Duck.
Duck.
are you sure?
Goose. Geese. Geese.
Swan.
Yes, yes. Who
It's a
said geese?
goose.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So this,
Eagle.
This is eagle.
okay,
Yeah.
bird of prey, and this.
Duck.
Duck.
Now, do you see the difference between the duck and the geese? So, geese generally has a more upright stance, and geese also has a much longer neck in comparison to the duck. Okay. It's very strange. When I put it on a slide, everyone knows the answer. But when we are out on the field, it becomes so difficult, right? Has anyone come across this ever? कि वो एक bird थी, वो उड़ रही थी, वो पता नहीं चला क्या थी. वो एक bird थी जो बैठी हुई थी, लेकिन हमें नहीं पता क्या थी, because light नहीं आ रही थी, because color नहीं दिख रहे थे, right? But as you can see, through the slide, you can actually help mold your mind or brain in such a way that you can ideally guess the kind of bird that you're looking at. Maybe not the exact thing.
The host wants you to speak. Unmute yourself.
So there is a general concept of habitat preference. The first concept is generalists. Now, birds that are generally found in our urban environments are called generalists because they are highly adaptive. They can adapt to any given situation around them, given the situation of the food, the shelter, everything else. And the others are called habitat specialists. Now, these birds are the birds that cannot adapt as quickly as the generalists do. Now, they might be able to adapt a little, but they will not adapt entirely to the situation or the surroundings that are thrown at them. Now, as we all know, that urban environments keep changing very rapidly because the tree cover changes rapidly, and sometimes the usage of land changes very quickly. Because once what was a grassland is now a forest. Once that was, let's say, a forest is now a city. So something like that. All these things keep changing rapidly. Now, most of the generalists are called generalists because they can cater, or they can, let's say, sustain these kinds of changes easily, and they can move on with their lives and adapt to whatever is thrown at them. But at the same time, habitat specialists are the birds that cannot do that very willingly. Okay, they will try to mold their lives in a way as per the situations that are present at that moment. But at the same time, they might not be able to do so. So if they're not able to do so, then they have to move away from that place to a specific kind of habitat that they prefer. Okay, so that is just the general definition of these two concepts that are there. I'm just going to give you an example because it's very easy to tell you what it is, but it's fairly it'll become easier for everyone to understand if given examples alongside. Okay, all of you must have seen this bird around your houses.
Yeah.
Can anyone tell me which one this could be?
Is it
Seven sisters.
Rufus Siblius?
I mean, if you're telling me the scientific name, even then that's not right.
These are 7 sisters. Yeah.
That's right. But what is the actual name of the species of the bird? Would you know it? Something which is, I mean, when you're having a conversation with a few friends, and sometimes one of your friends, everyone has that friend who keeps babbling.
Babbler? Is it a babbler?
Yes. Yes. So
It's
you
a
don't
babbler?
mind that yes, that it is a babbler. You don't mind that babbling, and it's not derogatory in any way. But I'm just saying that they like to babble, and that's why they're called babblers. So this one is one of the generalist species. It's called the jungle babbler. Uh, what is very surprising about this bird is, even though it's called jungle babbler, it's hardly found in jungles because this bird is one bird which has been dependent on human beings for such a long time that it likes to stay near urban settlements. And the max that you will see them near forests is at the edges of the forests or the jungles and not entirely in it because they are so used to the food that we let out. They're so used to the water that we keep out. They're so used to everything that a human being does. Okay. So that's why this
I have a
particular bird.
question. I
Yes,
have a question.
these are.
It's in English. It's called Seven Sisters. Why Sat Bhai? Why Bhai in Hindi? Why
Well,
not?
honestly, I think India has always been a very male
Dominated.
dominating society. So maybe that's why they just wanted to be a little sexist in that regard, it seems. I have no idea why it was done like that. But anyway, so there's no one answer to this, and there's no right answer to this as well. So they are called Seven Sisters in English, and they were called Sadh Bhai in Hindi. So so I have no idea why that distinction. Anyway, so fun trivia. I think all of you or most of you would be aware of the game called Angry Birds on mobile and on iPads and on every platform there is. So babblers were one of the birds that had inspired that game because these babblers always look angry. Okay. Yeah. Do you think this is the same bird, or do you think this bird is different to what we had just discussed?
The eyes
It's
look
angrier.
the eye is different.
Okay, the eyes are different.
Yeah, yellow.
And do you also feel that there is a gray patch on the forehead of this bird?
Yeah,
Mm.
Okay, so those are a few distinctions. This is also a kind of babbler, but this is a large gray babbler. It's called the large gray babbler. Now it is, so whatever birds that we are discussing today are found in Delhi NCR. So you don't have to go around looking for them in other cities. These are the kinds of birds that you can see here as well. But these birds are habitat specialists, and these birds prefer scrublands and semi-arid. Now, historically, Delhi is has always been a scrubland and not really an evergreen sort of habitat. It was only after the British came in and also the Congress decided that Delhi needs to look a lot greener than it actually is, and that is when they had planted something called Vilaiti Kikad, Prosopis juliflora, which was obviously an invasive plant, and that was an attempt at rewilding Delhi quickly. And in addition to that, the British also uh, I mean, you must have heard about Lutyens Delhi, which covers much of Connaught Place, Johor Bagh, Lodi Road, all these other places. So these places were actually, they had actually planted more evergreen trees than the deciduous trees, which is the general flora of Delhi NCR. Okay. So this particular bird, just to give you an example, you could find them in Aravali Biodiversity Park in Gurgaon, Vasant Kunj, Sanjay One in Delhi, and also Asola Bhati Wildlife Sanctuary, and also this place, Jahapana Forest in GK2. Okay, so I'm listing these places because Jahapana Forest is not a very big forest. It's mostly a big park. Okay, so these birds are actually kind of landlocked in that small park. It's not a very small park, but in that small park. Okay. The max you can see them is near the houses that are adjoining or at the periphery of the park. Other than that, these birds don't like to come out of the park because whatever they want is inside that place. That is drier plants, thorny scrubs, thorny bushes, more drier soil. That is something that they look forward to. Okay. Let's start with the actual presentation and move on from here. Now, since we are done with most of the concepts that we had to discuss, and so this will become easier for everyone to understand. I have taken the liberty of uh, basically designing my slides in a way and distinguishing birds on the type of beak types they have. Okay, because beak types generally tell you what it is. Okay, now Bandana, can we mute everyone? It'll help now. Or I can request everyone to mute themselves for a while. Thank you. Okay, so basically I have characterized birds in the type of beak shapes they have. Now every beak tells you a different story.
यहाँ पे कौन है यहाँ पे कौन पौधे दिखाएगा
Vivek, can you mute everybody, please?
At least I know
Vivek.
that there's someone at the nursery right now.
Where is Vivek? Vivek. Done.
Abhishek, I'll unmute you.
Sorry.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. So basically the beak type is very important because the beak tells you what the bird might be able to eat. Now, it does not tell you the only kind of food they eat, but they will tell you the kind of food that they prefer. Okay. So the first one is this one. Can anyone unmute themselves and tell me what is this kind of beak? What do you think it might be able to eat? It has a long curve.
People can raise their hand, or people can put it in a chat window who wants to speak.
Yeah. So just a very normal, regular question, an easy one. What do you think this bird might be able to eat, considering the beak shape here? It has a long, pointed beak, thin beak.
Somebody saying it can be used for sucking nectar.
Correct. It is a nectar-eating beak, and the only bird that is primarily nectar-eating bird in Delhi NCR is this one. I'm sure everyone has seen these birds.
Sunbird.
Correct. And as we know that the male in birds in general, in birds, the females are not as pretty as the males. The males are much prettier in general. And there's a reason for that. The reason is, first of all, it has to woo females, it has to attract them. So that's why they have to be prettier. But at the same time, there's a reason for the female birds to be a little drab. Now, I would like to clear this right before we have this conversation that in bird watching, drab is not a derogatory term. Okay, because a lot of human beings feel that drab is a very, very derogatory word when you define looks of a certain person. I would agree, but in birds that's not the case. It's generally drab is a very common regular word that is used in bird watching because the females look drab. They mostly have the coloration, more earthy colorations like brown and green, and that is there for a reason. The reason is that they do have to take care of the young ones, and they do have to protect their nests. They do have to protect their eggs as well from predators and other beings. That's why they merge with the environment a lot more than males do. Males don't have to do much, of course. Apart from mating, a lot of males do indulge in territory protection. That is basically protecting nests from other birds around them. That is what their job is. And the other job that they have is when the females are in nesting, they don't generally leave the nests. So the males have to often come and feed them. Okay, so that is the second responsibility that they have. In some cases, both males and females can incubate eggs. Okay. Now, I do remember sharing a key with you, and I do understand that it'll be difficult for you to remember all the keywords. So I'm going to explain this once again. SS basically is size and shape. Okay. So here in this case, as you can see, that the bird is really very, very small. It's about 11 centimeters. It's a very active bird. It is a very fidgety bird as well. In addition to that, what you see on the left side, that is the male, generally gets this breeding plumage only during the breeding season, which starts from February and onwards till about July, August. Okay. Other than that, it looks very similar to the females, but it is still more vibrant than the females in general. Okay. The females don't change coloration. They don't have a breeding plumage. Okay. As you can see, bee is behavior. It's very restless, energetic. Of course, as it's nectar eating, it hovers around flowers a lot more. It's a resident bird of Delhi NCR. It is the only sunbird you'll find in Delhi NCR. In addition to that, a lot of people confuse these birds with hummingbirds. So I'd like to just address that first. There are no hummingbirds in India, so you don't have that. I mean, you don't have to get confused after the session. So you can always say that if you find something like a hummingbird in Delhi NCR, it's most often the purple sunbird that you're looking at. The kind of movements that they have a very similar movement to the hummingbirds. They can basically flap their wings really fast. Of course, not as fast as hummingbirds, but still very fast. Other than that, since it's the Floriculture Society of Noida, I'd like to ask you a question. You must know this plant in and out. Can anyone tell me what plant this is? Anyone, and it could be very quick. Can't hear you, Bandana, or anyone
It's
else.
bougainvillea. I said everybody's on silence, so then I will say bougainvillea.
Yeah, it is the bougainvillea. And why do I have this tree here is because these birds, the purple sunbirds, prefer these trees for nesting. Now, since all of us know that bougainvillea does have some kind of thorns in them, and that is basically something that helps protect these nests as well. And that is one of the reasons why these birds prefer nesting on this tree. Now, another thing is, this is the kind of nest they make. Okay, you can see the female peeping out of that small hole that is there. What do you think are these white things around the nest?
Newspaper.
Newspaper. So these birds make, I mean, all of us know that a lot of birds make beautiful nests, right? This is not one of those birds. These birds make a very ugly nest. Honestly, I'm sorry to say it, but they are not artists at all. Anyway, so here in this case, the white things that you see around the nest are basically cobwebs. So cobwebs is something that they collect to help support or stick the nest together. Okay, considering that cobwebs do have a sticky nature, that is something that gives them the necessary adhesive nature to basically come together. Okay, so that is how they make the nest. And there's a small story of one of my bougainvilleas right outside my house. It's right at the entrance, and it faces one of the bathroom windows. So I had to keep that window shut for 2 months because they were nesting on it. And I used to keep a small slit open so that I could just peep and not disturb them. It was very interesting to see that both males and females take the responsibility very, very seriously. The females are the ones that usually make the nest. The females are the ones that usually incubate the nests. But at the same time, the males are the ones that protect the female and the nests. Okay. Does anyone know this tree?
Paneer.
Yeah. As a kid, I used to remember this as the bell tree because I didn't know any better. Okay. And in English, it's called the yellow oleander. As we all know that it does have a very, very juicy and very sweet sap at the base of the flower. As kids, I used to not pluck them out, but take them out from there gently and then suck the nectar from the base of the flower. So that is exactly what this bird does. You can see a female sunbird trying to get the nectar from one of the flowers there. So why are we discussing these trees? We are discussing these trees because they are one of the most common avenue trees in Delhi NCR. You'll find them everywhere. Even maybe, I mean, in Noida, wherever you're staying, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of these trees around, and bougainvilleas are everywhere. So these two are the very preferred trees for these birds. So why we're discussing them is because it will give you a fair idea of where to try and look for these birds. Okay, which tree do they prefer? And this will also set a benchmark for the kind of project that I'm going to discuss with you towards the end. That since you had mentioned, it will give you a proper insight into what all could be done. Beak 2. This is another type of beak that we're going to discuss. Can anyone tell me what kind of beak do these birds have? What do they eat? Please don't say mirchi.
Nuts,
Okay.
shells.
Primarily, what have you seen them eat? What do you feed them generally?
Oh dear. Now, if somebody else is also saying they can't hear, what is happening? I can hear clearly.
If you can hear clearly, then there is some problem at their end.
Okay. So somebody's saying guava, fruits,
Correct. So it's basically a fruit-eating bee. It's also called a frugivore. Okay. So generally, parakeets have fruit-eating beaks. We're going to play a game. I can request everyone to unmute themselves and then quickly mute themselves back again once this game is done.
or if people write, I'll tell you the answers.
Sure. So we're going to play 2 truths and a lie. I'm going to give you 3 statements. You'll have to tell me which one is false and which 2 are true. It's about this bird. Can anyone tell me the proper identification of this bird?
See
Or
somebody
the
write.
kind? Or the kind?
Come on, everybody. Which bird is this?
Okay.
So you want to know which is the false statement?
Yes, the first one is they feed on fruits, insects, and grains. The second one is they are excellent mimics. And the third one is they make nests on the ground.
So 2 people are saying, one is saying parrot, parakeet, rose-ringed parakeet.
Right, right. Okay. So here, the 3 statements are in front of you. You just have to tell me which one is false. And yeah, that's pretty much
So the third one, 2 people are saying third one is false.
correct. So as you can see, a statement that I had, something that I had mentioned earlier was that, of course, the beak shape tells you the kind of food that it prefers, but it does not tell you what all it can eat. Okay. So here, they are certainly fruit eaters. They certainly have a fruit eating beak, but at the same time, they do feed on insects and grains. Another thing is, none of the birds are vegetarians. The only preference of, let's say, grain eating, fruit eating, and insect eating basically comes with age. When you're young, when the kids, when the juveniles in the nest, basically, they also do have a protein requirement. So when they have a protein requirement, what do they get? The parents just come with insects and feed them, like for example, worms, larvae, other insects, etc. They have to get them. So even the parakeets will get them, and even the sunbirds will get them. So all these things are important to know because a bird cannot only survive on one kind of food. Okay, they do have several things to survive on. They do need several sources. Okay, if it's only one source, then it's very restrictive, and obviously you might not be able to find that particular food in a particular area. So third one is correct. Basically it is false that they make nests on the ground. They're not ground-dwelling birds. So where do they make their nests?
Tree branches.
Okay. Anyone else?
Come on, guys. Where do rose-ringed parakeets in holes in trees? Chandraji is saying.
Correct. So basically, they anywhere. For example, woodpeckers, parakeets, kingfishers, maynas, starlings. All these birds are basically called cavity nesters. It does not depend on where the hole is. There needs to be some kind of a hole somewhere to for them to nest in. Now, rose-winged parakeets cannot make these holes. So what they do is they take over these holes from other birds like woodpeckers or barbets for that matter. Okay. Here you can see that it's basically feeding on millet. So that gives you an insight on, of course, they can feed on grains as well. They are actually pests. These birds are invasive. No, it does not matter that they are beautiful, because everyone likes seeing them a lot. Oh, tota here and there, everything is very green and nice. Yes, of course, it's very green and nice. But at the same time, these birds are invasive in nature. So these birds are also one of the prime reasons for the disappearance of certain other birds from urban sectors like sparrows, etc. So the sparrows have often moved away from cities. They have not died because of these towers. They basically experience a lot of competition from other birds and other bigger birds like parakeets, menas, and crows, and pigeons, of course, for that matter. Anyway, so these birds do have a fruit piercing beak. A lot of times, what happens is that they do feed on the pulp which is inside the fruit. And to get to that pulp, they have to basically pierce the fruit and break it. So that is something that is what explains the basic design of the beak. That there is pointiness here, and then there is pointiness underneath, so that it forms like a kind of a hook, which helps them tear the fruit apart. Okay. Are these two birds the same, or are they different?
Folks, do they look the same, or is there a difference between the bird on top and the one at the bottom?
And why do you think that is?
They kind of look the same, except
Anyway, so here,
neck. Yeah, the ring around the neck. Mona, the ring around the neck.
So basically, the one on the top, it has the ring around the neck that properly defines the name rose-winged parakeet, and the one at the bottom does not have a ring. So basically, the one on the top is a male. The males will have the ring around their necks. The females will never have a ring around their neck. The females do not have the rose ring. So most often, the birds are named after the appearance of the male because the males are prettier and more easily distinguishable from other birds. Because most of the times, like for example, in ducks, all female ducks look the same. It was very difficult for me. I got so demotivated during my first and second year of bird watching that I said I'll stop watching ducks altogether because I could not identify them. So that's why females mostly will have this brownish greenish look, but males will have a certain extra oomph when it comes to their physical appearance, and that is what helps ornithologists and other publishers to name these birds properly. So what kind of trees are these? It's fairly easy. One, basically they are fig trees. The one on the top is the banyan tree, and the one at the bottom is the peepal tree. Now, why are we discussing these trees here? Because the parakeets are very fond of figs as fruits. So if you want to look for parakeets in your backyard, it will be best for you to try and look at the banyan and the peepal trees around your households, because that would not only lead you to a chance to see parakeets, but it will actually give you a chance to see a lot of other fruit-eating birds that we're going to discuss further. Again. So I'm not going to ask you the identification of that bird. Of course, it's a bulbul. So bulbuls also feed on nectar and even lizards. Second, they make nests in tree holes. And thirdly, they have pink colored eggs. So the idea about this game is not to just have fun, but also to tell you about the peculiar habits and of these birds that are very, very specific to them. So if anyone could give me the correct answer to this.
Okay. Chandraji is saying the second one is false.
Okay.
Anybody else? It pink sounds weird. Nobody has pink eggs.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was going to say. That it is very weird to have pink colored eggs. But okay. So no more answers.
No more answers.
Okay. So she is right. So they do not make their nests in tree holes. They do make uh, nests in trees or branches of trees. And yes, they do have pink colored. And bulbuls, as you can see, the beak shape, the beak definitely helps them feed on fruits, yes. But at the same time, they have a very generalist sort of beak that helps them take in anything that they want. That is one major reason as to why they are generalists, as to why they are so abundant around us, since they can survive on so many things. The, the name of the bird comes from the circled area on the picture. It's of course there is red color there, but what is that area called?
9. Red vented.
Correct. So that area, that body part is called the vent. Basically, the bum of the bird is called the vent. So here it's called the red vented bulbul. Size, as you can see, is 20 centimeters, is considerably larger than the purple sunbird that we had done a couple of minutes ago. Apart from that, it's a fruit eater, and one of the main trees that you'll be able to find them on are mulberry trees during fruiting season. But other than that, they are everywhere. And the color pattern, as you can see, is mostly brown and whitish in color, dirty white, but at the same time, it does have a black face with a small mohawk kind of a crest. Okay. But the main thing that you would want to remember in this case is the red vent, because that's where the name comes from. So it becomes very easy for everyone to start remembering names of birds once they can relate to all these things. Like certain birds are named after how they look, the color of the bird. Some certain birds are named after certain body parts, like in this case. Certain birds are named after people, which will be a little difficult to remember, but with time you might be able to remember it. Other than that, certain birds are named after the habitats that they're found in. Okay. Common tree around our houses. One of the very common trees around our houses. The pseudo Christmas trees that we have in India are these. So, which one do you think this tree is?
Come on, Floriculture Society.
Yeah. So it's called the Ashoka. Yes, it's the Ashoka tree. Okay. Now, let's say you're playing badminton and your shuttle goes into this tree. Will it be easy for you to find?
You get in there.
So basically, the idea behind the preference of these trees with bulbuls is they like to nest inside them. Why do they do that? Because of the dense foliage. Because the dense foliage becomes very difficult for other birds or other animals to threaten these nests, and that's why they like making their nest deep inside these. Okay. A lot of times, when the pruning and all do not take place, another thing that I'd like to request you guys is you have to stop pruning trees before September. That is something that will help you because the breeding time for a lot of birds that prefer breeding on trees is till September. So even if you try and prune your trees in September, that will be a better idea in order to not disturb these birds during nesting. Because what happens is when you start pruning these trees, then the nests are a lot more exposed to the outside world, and that is something that threatens their safety. Okay.
Abhishek, just one thing. Somebody's come up with a question. Is Bulbul a universal name or is it peculiar to India?
No, we do have bulbuls outside of India as well, but it's
Or bulbuls?
sorry, yeah, they call bulbuls. So basically, they are, yes. So just because it sounds Indian,
Indian.
or Yeah, that doesn't mean that you don't have them. Like even Koel, for that matter, is there. Koel is an internationally recognized word. So anyway, so bulbuls are primarily found in Asia. Okay, you don't find bulbuls outside of Asia. Anyway, so here you have another different kind of bulbul. As you can see that the crest of this bird is very different to what the crest of the red-vented bulbul was. Of course, what will be more confusing is that this also has a red-colored band. But at the same time, you can also see that there are red and white markings on the cheek of the bird. And that is something that will help you differentiate this bird from the red-vented bulbul. This is called the red-whiskered bulbul. Now, all bulbuls in Delhi NCR have almost the same size, which is 20 centimeters approximately. You don't have to remember the actual size of the bird, but yes, you should be able to describe a particular bird that you have seen as, let's say, a mena-sized bird or a bulbul-sized bird, which is something that is going to help you later on, at least to know कि कितना बड़ा होता है, like how big it could be. Anyway, this bird is also a fruit eater and also an insect eater for that matter. It also can survive on a lot of other things that are around us. It's a little more uncommon than red-vented bulbuls, but still a very common species to come across, especially during the fruiting season and especially during their breeding season, which starts in February end. So during the rest of the year, they might not be as common, but once they start breeding towards February end, you might be able to see these birds a lot more commonly around you. Also because it coincides with the fruiting season of trees.
The mohawk is also very well done, you know, it's freshly.
Correct. But something that you might only want to remember in this case is that there is a red colored patch on the cheek of the bird. Another common bird, or let's say formerly common bird around our urban landscapes, was this one. This bird has now started moving a little away from urban societies due to the lack of big trees, due to the lack of constant disturbances by crows and other marauding birds and creatures around them. But yes, this bird is actually a very big bird. It is the only resident hornbill of Delhi NCR. It's called the Indian grey hornbill. It does have a cousin down south, which is the Western Ghat endemic. It's called the Malabar grey hornbill. Okay. There's obviously a slight difference in the way they look, but I'm not going to get into that. But here, as you can you see the horn here? I think the picture should clear out. Yeah. Do you see the horn on the top of the beak here? This particular horn-like thing.
Oh, I never knew the hornbill because there was a horn on the bill.
Yeah. So basically, this is present in the males. The females don't have that. In this species, the male and female look entirely same, but the only difference is that the horn is more prominent in the case of males than in females. This also has a fruit piercing and eating color pattern. As you can see, it's grayish and of course has a little bit of white on its body. Now imagine this. This bird is actually a cavity nester. So since it's such a big bird, it might require a very big hole inside a tree. And all these holes are generally naturally occurring holes. They are not made by any other creature because woodpeckers are not this big. Barbets are not this big. So basically, they depend on naturally occurring big holes on big trees in general. They generally do not nest on smaller trees because that does not give them the level of safety they would require for the nest. They have a very interesting nesting behavior. Do you see a small slit-like hole in that tree there? What do you think this bird is doing there?
Laying its eggs.
Okay.
No, but it's a male.
Yeah. So it cannot lay eggs. Yes. So what do you think it's really doing there?
Oh, sir. Chandraji is saying it's feeding the whatever.
Yeah. So basically, that small slit is a small part of a much bigger hole which would have been present in that tree. And that is where the female would have placed itself. Okay. The female is actually inside that hole. They cover the opening of the hole with mud and poop. Okay. In order to basically maintain safety of that particular female in the nest. So they only leave a small slit open so that the female can take its beak out and the male can deliver food every 15 minutes to the bird, to the female. That is how hard the male has to work in this case in order to ensure a food supply, a proper food supply to the female during this very sensitive time. Around this time, the females also shed their feathers a lot in order to fit properly inside that hole.
Hmm.
Okay, the female has to be in that nest for a good 1.5 2 months because the bigger the bird, the more time it takes for the birds to mature. It will only come out of that nest when the juveniles and the female cannot fit inside together. Yeah.
And Chandraji is saying feeding the female. I saw this on the Mehroli Badarpur Road.
Yes, I have seen it in Lajpat Nagar. In a park right in front of my house as well. But they have chopped down that tree, so I no longer get them. There was a time when for 5 straight years I used to get up by hearing their calls, but now no longer, unfortunately. Okay, very common bird around our houses. This is one. Uh, but there's a reason why a lot of people might have not seen it, but I'm sure that these people must have heard it. It's what is the color of the head in this case?
Brown, green,
Yeah.
black. Brown.
So it's very easy to actually name this bird. It's called the brown-headed barbet. Okay. Now, woodpeckers and barbets are the only two kinds of birds that can make a hole in a tree in Delhi NCR. There is no other bird, even parakeets, all the cavity nesters on the tree. On the tree is what I mean. Because considering that the barks are a little harder in comparison to the mud banks that are there, only two kinds of birds that can make holes in a tree are barbets and woodpeckers. Okay, and barbets are not woodpeckers. A lot of people confuse barbets with woodpeckers, but that's not true. They do share certain similar habits, like for example, being able to move around like woodpeckers, or basically having the same kind of movement on barks and twigs and trees. And the other kind of similar behavior would be the nesting behavior, in which that they do require holes inside the tree to nest. The only time you'll be able to see this bird properly is during the breeding time, which again starts Feb end. It is a very vocal bird. Maybe what I can do is after this session is done or over, I'll send the call of this bird to Bandana and she can share it on the group with all of you. And I'm pretty sure there won't be one person who hasn't heard this bird. That's why it becomes difficult to place a particular call to the bird because you keep hearing that bird, but you are unable to see it properly. But during breeding time, it becomes easy for us to see them as well because what they do is they go to the top of the tree and they call from there. Of course, it depends on how tall the tree is because for us to see that far often also becomes very difficult. Right. So anyway, what is it feeding on here? As you can see, it again has a fruit-eating beak, and I'm pretty sure you would know what it's feeding on here.
Come on, everybody. Burk. Somebody saying worm.
No, it's a fruit-eating beak.
Gular. 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 Fig. Gular.
It's basically banyan fig.
Banyan tree.
You can also see the shape of the leaf there. So, and basically, Do you feel, just give me a yes or no answer here. Do you think the color of the fig there is very similar to the color around the eye? Like yellowish.
Very true.
This bird is a master camouflaging bird. First of all, it's green in color when it comes to the body, so it camouflages really well with the leaves on trees. Secondly, it has a brown colored head, which camouflages really well with the twigs and the branches on the tree. Third is it likes to hide in thick trees in order to survive predatory attacks. The area around the eye looks as if it's a berry or a fruit from the tree. That's this the overall appearance of the bird is something that helps it survive predatory attacks from other birds because it likes to hide. It's a very non-confiding bird. It's a very shy bird in general. It's not a very small bird though. But it's very shy in nature during the year. Other than the breeding season, because during the breeding season it's very bold. But at this because it has to be aggressive in looking for mates around the time. But during the rest of the year, it's very shy in nature. So it likes to hide in these fig trees in order to survive. This is something that we have on the poster, of course, and it is a little more colorful than the bird that we've just discussed, but it's the same kind of bird. The same belongs to the same family of barbets, but it's called a coppersmith barbet. Now, can anyone tell me why is it called a coppersmith barbet? Like, does it work with metal? No. Does it? Does it? Okay. But even if it does tuck tuck on a wooden tree, it will certainly not sound like metal.
Coppersmith, huh?
So why coppersmith? Okay.
Red. Red because of fire. Fire red.
Okay, let me give you the answer to it. So it's because of the call that it has. The call goes something like this. It sounds like toot, toot, toot. So it's a very metallic call, as if a coppersmith is working or hammering a metal sheet. It is something like that, and that is exactly why it's called the coppersmith barbet. We have discussed several names that are kept that are based that have originated from the physical appearances of birds, but there are certain other names that originate from the way they call as well. So there are there are different reasons to particular names of birds. Anyway, in this case, it's mostly the call. It's not mostly, but it is only the call that the bird has. This is fairly small in comparison to the brown-headed barbet. Brown-headed barbet is a much bigger cousin. And of course, this requires much smaller holes to nest in. In addition to that, this is also very fond of pigs. So if you want to look at all the different kinds of fruit eating birds in your neighborhood, you just have to go to a banyan tree or a peepal tree to look at all these fruit eating birds, because all the fruit eating birds come there, including the Indian grey hornbill. I have a small video for all of you. I'm not sure how it's going to work because the bandwidth in India is kind of poor, but let's see how it works.
There's no video symbol. Disappeared.
So there was a small hole there that they've excavated. As you can see from the picture, it goes into that small hole. I'm sorry for the quality of this video because it was in a very damp, dark place. So unfortunately, in urban cities, or fortunately for us, because they're more visible to us, there are a few natural perches that have been added. They're not natural, but they're now natural perches for these birds. Of course, first is fig trees like banyan and peepal, which is something that we enjoy. But other than that, electrical wires are now one of the most common places to sight all the birds. I so being an urban naturalist, it's very interesting to see how things change, how habits change with birds, and as well as with human beings for that matter. So I would like to say during monsoons and during winters, keep looking at all the electrical wires around your houses because it will lead to something or the other. Like it'll basically make you see some new bird or mother because these perches are now like natural perches to all these birds. Okay, they're no longer artificial perches for them. What is a group of pigeons called? Crown, dropping, school, or murmuration?
Murmuration.
Okay. Anyone
Oh,
else?
nice. 1, 2, 3, 4. Murmuration sounds nice. Nobody saying anything.
I can give you a hint. You can look at the video.
Ish.
It's called dropping of pigeons because obviously they like to keep dropping their poop everywhere inside the city and outside the city. Anyway, so it's called the dropping. Yes.
So people guess crown, school, and everything apart from dropping.
So there is a collective noun called murmuration, but it's of starlings.
Sparrows, okay.
No, starlings.
Starlings, oh, murmuration of starlings, okay.
Anyway, so here in this case, all of us know about the blue rock pigeons that are all around us. I'm not going to discuss that bird because that bird kind of disgusts me because it has taken up space for a lot of different kinds of birds in our cities, and they have literally driven them away. And of course, it's not their fault that they have a certain behavior of invasions and all. But of course, that tends to be one of the most disliked birds in Delhi NCR or in the world for that matter. Anyway, so here we have a different cousin of that bird, but at the same time, it's not as menacing as its cousins. Okay, so here I've marked a particular body part that will help you name this bird, or let's say come to the name of this bird.
Yellow-footed something or the other. Pigeon.
Yes, yellow-footed pigeon. But what is the overall color of this bird?
Golden yellow.
It's called yellow-footed green pigeon. Okay, so these birds, of course, they belong to the family of pigeons, yes, but at the same time, these birds are not as ill-mannered as their blue rock pigeon cousins. This bird is more shy. This bird has a different habit. Like for example, if you see the beak of this this bird has a little stubbier, more broader beak in general in comparison to the blue rock pigeons. Blue rock pigeons have a little thinner a beak. Now, that tells you a lot about the eating habits of course, the blue rock pigeons as well as the green pigeons. The green pigeons are primarily fruit eaters. They do not dwell into anything else apart from fruits. That is why you'll basically find them on all the different kinds of fruiting trees across Delhi NCR, especially banyan and people, because they also love figs, for that matter. And also during winters, another interesting behavior of this bird is because it's cold, they like to bask in the sun. They sit on top of trees that are little barren, that do not have too many leaves on them, because most of the trees in our region are deciduous. So they do not have leaves during winters. So they like to sit on top of these trees, the top branches, and try and bask there in the sun. They also have a certain flocking behavior, but it's not as bad as with the rock pigeons. They will have flocks of about 20, 25. What do you think is the color of the eye here?
Black, gray.
Now,
It's red and black.
the red is the fruit on the tree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah,
So this bird has one of the most wonderful looking eyes in pigeons. And these birds are a lot more shy. Like there is a common joke around us bird watchers that if you go near a tree and if a group of pigeons fly away, they're mostly the yellow-footed green pigeons because the blue dog pigeons are not scared of human beings. Anyway, so this bird is very, very shy. It's difficult to locate as well because of the coloration of the body. But at the same time, if you get to have a closer look at this bird in good light, you can see the amazing different kinds of contrasting colors on its body as well as in the eyes of the bird. Another angry looking bird, which is very commonly heard around our urban landscapes. Heard. Not seen perhaps, but heard. Also, one of the birds that has been heavily mentioned in folklores and other books. Nice sounding bird.
Koyal.
Correct. Why do you think we have two pictures here?
Male and female.
Which one do you think is a male? As considering that males are prettier in general, which one do you think is prettier?
The striated one.
So you're saying that that is the male and this is the female, correct?
Yeah. The black.
Anyone else has a, okay. There's someone, Chandra
Black.
says black is male.
No, somebody's saying black is male.
Yeah, Chandra is saying that. Yes.
Black is male.
So she's right, or he or she, I'm not sure because Chandra is
She.
yes. So she's right in this case. The male is the black one and the speckled one is the female in this case. But there's a reason for that as well. How? So where do quails make their nests?
Trees.
Okay. Anyone else has any other answer? What kind of nesting behavior do quails have?
Mm-hmm.
It should be interesting. People might be taking a little while to write also, I think.
Hmm.
So anyone who'd like to unmute themselves and talk to me about this, it'll be nice.
They generally lay their eggs in the crow's nests.
Okay. So yes. So this behavior is called brood parasitism. Brood parasitism. BROOD parasitism. So basically, the quails belong to the family of cuckoos that basically do not make their own nest. They lay their eggs in other similarly sized birds' nests. It is not always the crow, but they prefer the crow for a reason because the male of the Asian quail looks very similar to a crow, the coloration of the male. Okay. So in this regard, how do they really pull it off? Considering that the Asian quails are blackish in color, their coloration is similar to that of the crows, and crows have a mobbing behavior. Like for example, they have a flocking behavior. They tend to go after different kinds of birds and trouble them as well. And they also do not let other birds come near their nests. So what the male quail does here is basically tries and troubles the crows. All the crows flock. They go after the male of the Asian quail. That gives the female the window to go to a nest nearby and place their eggs in it.
That's silly. Don't the crows come back and then just break the nest or break them in?
No, they can't differentiate.
Oh, they're dumb.
They can't differentiate. Also, another interesting thing about quail eggs is that quail eggs are actually more mature than the eggs that are already laid in the nest. So quail eggs tend to hatch faster as well. They're already semi-ready to hatch. And that is why quail eggs are one of the first to hatch on the normal nest of a particular egg, of a particular bird.
You mean there are already crow's eggs in the nest and the quail adds on its own to that?
Yes. It waits. It knows when there are eggs. It eyes these nests very carefully. And so what really happens is they won't go to a nest and just place an egg there if it's an empty nest. They can't do that because that will obviously raise suspicion. So what they do is for a couple of days they linger on, they suspect all these sites. They basically keep an eye on all these nests around them. And then when they see that the eggs have been laid, they go to a particular nest, lay their eggs there, and go away.
Outsourcing. Okay.
Yeah. So here you can see a crow feeding a cuckoo juvenile, quail juvenile in the picture that is on the left. And on the right, you can see a mena trying to feed a quail. Now here on the right side, you can see that the mena is certainly a smaller bird in comparison to the cuckoo, right? There was a very funny incident that happened a couple of years ago with my bird watch. I mean, in my bird watching experience. Uh, Sometimes what happens is if a quail is desperate and if it does not find a similar bird's nest anywhere around it, it lays its egg in a smaller bird's nest, like for example, a common tailor bird, an ashy pinya. Now these birds are very, very small in comparison. Even then, so the parents do have a very hard time feeding all these chicks. Okay, even if there is one chick in that particular nest, it becomes horribly tedious for all the parents to manage because of the food requirement of these big birds is obviously more in comparison to what their own kind has. And sometimes it also becomes difficult for them to reach the mouth of the cuckoo, of the quail, because of the size of the quail, sheer size of the quail cuckoo. Even the juvenile is much bigger than the kind of bird that is parenting it. Okay, so there was this one time when I saw a common tailor bird sitting on the head of the quail trying to feed it because it could not reach the mouth of the quail in any other way. Now, here is another example where Indian society plays an important role. Anyway, so here, what is a group of owls called? One is murder, parliament, dole, or a colony.
Parliament. Parliament.
So ideally, parliament is supposed to be filled with knowledgeable people,
Not owls.
with smart people, right? In India, that's the total opposite because in Hindi, Ullu generally states someone who's dumb. But the creature owl, the bird which is owl, is totally the opposite of being dumb because it is one of the smartest birds around. It is primarily nocturnal. Not all owls are nocturnal. They also have certain kinds of owls that are active during the day as well. But what really makes them stand apart from other birds is their skill of hunting, their patience, because during the day they will sit quietly in a tree, they will not move an inch. They almost they almost give you a feel of the bark itself, because most of the owls are generally grayish brownish in color. They are not very colorful in nature because they're nocturnal creatures and they need to hide during the day. Another kind of beak that we're going to discuss now is called the flesh tearing or eating beak. It includes all the urban hawks, the kites, the owls, etc. So here, three statements again for all of you. You guys have to tell me which one is true. I mean, which ones are true and which one is false. All owls are nocturnal. I think I've given you the answer already. Their feather arrangement helps them have a silent flight. They can turn their heads to 70 degrees. TTTT. What does that mean? The big G.
True. That's what he's saying.
One has to be false here. So if someone could guess.
All owls are not nocturnal. Some are nocturnal.
Right. Most of them are nocturnal, but all of them are not. So here, their feather arrangement helps them have a silent flight. This is very true, considering the fact that most of the animals that are active at night do have a very keen sense of hearing, obviously, because they need to be careful about other threats around them. So owls owls have a very, very good sense of hearing. At the same time, what happens is their feather arrangement is such, their bones are such, that helps them have a very silent flight. Why? Since their prey can also hear very properly during the night, because they also have a very good sense of hearing, owls have to be silent while attacking them. And their flight arrangement, or basically feather arrangement, is something that helps them do that in the dark. Okay, and then they can turn their heads to 70 degrees. That is also true. A lot of people kind of have this misconception that they can actually make a full 360-degree turn. That's not true. Yeah, but yes, they can do a 270-degree turn on their heads. The most common owl in Delhi NCR is this one. Now here, is this picture from, I mean, has this picture been taken during the night or has it been taken during the day?
The eyes are big and open.
Yes. But is this a picture that has been taken during the night, at night, or has it been taken during the day?
Night.
No, you can see sunlight in the eyes of the owl. Yeah. Anyway, so this picture has been taken during the day. So that basically explains that this particular owl is not an entirely nocturnal owl. It's called a diurnal owl. Diurnal. They're called diurnal because they can be active during the day as well as at night. And these birds are actually called spotted owlets.
Spotlights.
Spotted owlet. So they're called spotted owlet because on the brown body, they do have white spots on the body. And that's why they're called spotted owlets. They're basically diurnal in nature. They are also cavity nesters. Now they cannot make holes in the tree, but what they do is they take over natural holes that are already present in the tree, or they take the nests away from woodpeckers, etc. Because these spotted owlets are kind of small. They're not very big ones. They're smaller owls in general. Now, a lot of people, I think, are under the impression that owlets generally say that they are juveniles, but that's not true. Owlet just basically means a small owl. It can refer to juveniles as well as other bird kinds. Like in this case, it's a spotted owlet. It's an entire species of owl. It's not just juvenile of an owl. Now, owls are considered to be natural biological pest controllers because they go after rats, they go after mice, they go after insects, etc. So to keep a proper control of our surroundings when it comes to pests. Okay, that's why it's not recommended for us to be using too many chemical substances that curtails the presence of pests around us. By doing that, what we're doing is first of all, we are hindering the safety of all the natural biological pest controllers like owls and snakes around our houses. And secondly, it's also not good for the environment in general. That is something that could be that could also be of prime importance when it comes to managing a particular society or let's say an RWA sort of association or anything of that sort. If people know this more, know about this subject, where because all the people in all the colonies are very adamant on getting sprays done for mosquitoes, etc. But what they don't know is that in older times, when malaria was not really a very common disease, and why there are so many mosquitoes now, and why were they not there around that time? There's a big difference. The reason is that the dragonflies around that time were much more abundant than they are today because of the fumigation and other techniques that we have evolved to, or what we have started now. It is actually affecting the lives of beneficial insects as well, like dragonflies, butterflies, etc. So that is what, and a dragonfly, an adult dragonfly can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes in a day. So you can imagine with so many dragonflies around our houses, etc., at that very moment of time, malaria was still not as threatening as it is today because we have the population of mosquitoes has grown up a lot. And also fumigation is something that mosquitoes are now turning resistant against. And that's why these people keep changing the chemicals. And if they do that, it is hurting the environment and the surrounding in general. And of course, our health as well. Because a lot of us are asthmatic, a lot of people do have some lung diseases as well. Anyway,
Okay. Are we almost done now, Abhishek?
yes, we are almost done.
Oh.
So here, this is a very pretty owl, and it is also one of the most common owls in urban cities, and I would call them the most urban owl ever. But the issue is that may possibly none of us must have seen it. I mean, very limited number of us must have seen this owl around the houses, but they must have heard this bird sometime. It has a horrible sound. Unfortunately, it has a horribly screeching sound at night. This is a primarily nocturnal owl. It is not active during the day. It is also referred to as the banshee in several folk tales. Banshee is basically the white appearance of a particular, I mean, just in general, the white cloth appearance that is there for ghosts, etc. That's why it's called the banshee. Other than that, during the day, uh, since do you guys live in an apartment sort of environment? I mean, society?
Some Vivek does.
Okay. So these birds, barn owls, are generally called barn owls because in earlier times, barns had a lot of rats, etc., in them because of the kind of food, etc., that was stored in barns. So there were a lot of rats, there were a lot of mouses, etc. So around that time, barn owls were the ones that used to protect the barn from all these rodents. So they used to stick around barns because it was easy for them to get this food because they were primarily rodent hunters, right? So anyway, so even in cities for that matter, these birds prefer an apartment sort of a lifestyle, like a society, because it gives them enough space to rest. Like for example, they like ledges of buildings on taller floors. That is where they can rest because a lot of birds don't get to trouble them there. That's why a lot of apartments have reported these barn owls sitting outside the windows of their bathrooms, of their balconies, etc., because that is exactly where they'd like to be during the day. So if ever you come across a barn owl during the day, I would request everyone to not trouble it too much. Even if you have to take a picture, take it from a distance because if you disturb nocturnal owls or other animals during the day, they are fairly at a disadvantage against other species during the day because other species are active during the day and they are not. The most common urban raptor is this bird. It's called shikra, and as we all know, shikra is a word that has been derived from shikari. It basically tells you that it's a very skilled hunter. It prefers to go after rodents, insects, etc. But at the same time, if it's desperate, it can go after owls, smaller owls. It can go after bats. It can go after slightly bigger birds and itself as well. That is how skilled they are, and that's why they were called shikaris or shikras for that matter. Size is fairly small. It does not, like for example, whenever you say that it's a bird of prey, you will obviously think about something which is much bigger than this. But this one is a small urban raptor. But that does not take away anything from this species, like anything from this bird, because of the kind of hunter it is. I need to remove the drawings once. Sorry.
Must be some child somewhere.
Possibly. So I have a small picture for you guys to tell you that in this case, the male and the female certainly look different. The one on the extreme left is a male. The one on the extreme right is the female. Okay. As you can see, if you just compare the male and the female here, do not look at the picture in the middle first, but just the extreme left and the extreme right. The picture of the male tells you that the coloration of the eye is red in case of males, and the coloration of the eye in females is yellow. That is how you will distinguish between female shikra and a male shikra. Whenever you see a shikra around your house, it'll be easier for you to just remember the coloration of the eye. If you remember the eyes are red, it's a male. If the eyes are yellow, it's a female. But in addition to that, the coloration of the body overall is gray in color. Okay. But in the case of a juvenile, it's mostly brown in color and it has a lot of markings on the body. In addition to that, the coloration of the eye will be pale yellow, very lightish, whitish yellow in color. I'm going to zoom in for you guys a little so that I can make, this is the female. It's proper yellow eyes. This is the male, red. And this is the juvenile. It's whitish yellow. And the coloration of the body is also brown and not gray. The most common bird of prey around you is the black kite. A lot of people call it G. A lot of people say it's an eagle, but that's not true. It's basically called the black kite. But in the case of a black kite, the black kites can be actually be very, very huge in sizes. What they can sometimes surpass the sizes of certain eagles as well. They can be as big as eagles, but at the same time, their beaks are not as strong as eagles. There was once a time when these birds were actually birds of prey like hunters, but now they are mostly scavengers because as human beings, we have so much garbage around our houses. We have landfills of garbage, etc. So these birds have actually evolved themselves to being scavengers now and not hunters. They hardly hunt anymore. So you'll find them in great numbers around this Gazipur Mandi, which is primarily a meat mandi, meat market, and also near Lodi Road Islamic Center, where there's a lot of meat disposal, and a lot of other wetland areas which has a lot of rotten matter around it. So the easiest way to identify a kite from pictures or when you see them is the forked tail of the bird. If you can see the V-shaped tail there, that is something that will help you identify the black between a black kite and any other bird of prey that is. No other eagle has a forked wing. What they do have is a squarish or a roundish tail. So when in cities, if you're just looking at the sky, you'll see a lot of these big birds flying, and you'll notice one thing common with them. The only thing common is the forked tail. If you see the forked tail, then you can easily say that this is a kite. And if obviously at certain point of time you feel that there is another big bird flying with them which does not have a forked tail, then that is certainly not a kite. It's very easy for you to just say that it's a kite or not a kite. And if it's not a kite, then you have to work on other features. But that is something that we might not be able to discuss today because eagles are not a common sight in Delhi NCR during this time, in our backyard, etc. It's only a matter of coincidence. Kites are basically the most abundant bird of prey in the world. Uh, like there is no other bird of prey which is more in number than this bird. We're almost at the end of the session here. So here we'll be discussing about grain or seed-eating birds. What is the first bird that reminds you of this kind of beak?
Sparrow.
Correct. I'm going to skip this slide, going straight to the sparrow. So this is called a house sparrow. There are different kinds of sparrows in India. And we do have 3 different kinds of sparrows even in Delhi NCR. 2 of them are resident. One is a migratory sparrow to our region. But we are only going to discuss that one sparrow that we'll be able to see in our urban developments. That is the house sparrow. Now they are called house sparrows for a reason because for centuries and centuries, these birds have actually stayed very close to houses of people. There's a reason for that. First of all, it was very dependent on people for food. Secondly, it was also very dependent on these houses that people had because there were so many crevices and holes in the houses that they had easy access to nesting areas, nesting sites. So what they used to do, they used to get all the hay and the grasses, etc., and they used to rebolster those holes and make them into nests. That is something that was done. Now, a lot of a lot of people have tried to explain why the sparrows are not there in the cities anymore. I mean, not to that those. I mean, not those many numbers left anymore. Uh, the fact of the matter is that they did not die away. They did not die. They just moved away from these spaces also because there was so much competition from other birds, other bigger birds, and obviously more meaner birds in general. Because sparrows are generally very, very docile and subtle birds. And another reason is that now, as we all see, we do not have one-storied houses anymore. We generally live in larger houses, and as human beings, we like to occupy the smallest of spaces. Like for example, we will not let any any open spaces in any of our floors anymore. Like earlier, we used to have the chabutra earlier. We used to have ventilation systems, holes in near washrooms, etc. But we don't have that anymore, and there's no space for sparrows to nest, etc. That is another major reason as to why these sparrows have moved away from urban societies. As you can see, the one on the left is the male, and the one on the right is the female. The males are generally more colorful than the females in this regard, and they're also gray and sea caution beaks. One very important thing that I'd like to discuss with you is this. Everyone knows about house sparrows. Everyone knows kind of the reasons as to why they moved away. But nobody knows this. One is they love taking dust baths. Does anyone know why?
Maybe they have itchy feathers.
Okay. It's basically a preening and plumage maintenance. First is it removes excess oil from the feathers. Now, a lot of you might be wondering where do they get these oils from, right? कोई तेल लगाता है उनको जैसे हमें लगाता है. We don't have oils, right, everywhere in the body. So the birds near the tail, near the vent area, they do have a gland which produces oils, necessary oils for the plumage maintenance. What happens is this oil is something that helps them stay water resistant to an extent. That is why they're able to fly during rains as well. Okay, of course, not as fast as they usually do, but yes, they can at least escape and fly off somewhere nearby. Anyway, so that is one thing that helps. This oil is something that helps them stay dry. Okay, so but then sometimes what happens, there is excess oil on the body, which basically prevents them from flying as well. So to remove excess oil, they take dust baths. Now this dust is generally rough, so that is what helps the excess oil to be absorbed by this dust and just fall down. The other reason is the removes parasites like lice and mites from the body. Okay, so that is the reason why they take dust baths and not just water baths. Okay. If you're done.
Okay.
Uh, Everyone must have seen this bird around their houses. It's an amazing and an incredibly nice sounding songster. The males are more commonly seen, also because the males are the ones that commonly call. They prefer open vantage points like electrical wires and open branches, etc., where they sit and call away to attract mates, etc. And you must have seen the tail cocking behavior, that they move their tail up and down with jerks like this. Does this remind you of the dhobi movement that dhobis follow? Like, for example, the washing of clothes. Like, for example, they take the cloth and they do like this. Take the cloth and do like this. So basically smashing them against the ground, right? That is what they do. So these birds are actually called madiwala in Kannada, in Kannada language. A madiwala is basically dhobi. It basically means that they move the tail. They have the same tail movement as when the dhobi is actually trying to wash them. Okay. These are also cavity nesters and have blue colored eggs. So, but this bird uh, might not just depend on the cavities of trees. They can find cavities anywhere for that matter, like in mud banks, like in rocks, etc., and they can nest in there. It's not just the trees that they look forward to. It's just a cavity nester that might find any hole. Even a hole inside a building is something that they can manage to nest in. Now, the most common birds around in our gardens is this bird. It's called the common tailor bird. It's called the common tailor bird for a reason, because it stitches really nice looking nests. They look like this. So what they need is they basically need big leaved trees. The leaves should be big enough to be stitched together, and they use cobweb silk, basically spider web silk, to stitch these leaves with each other. And once it's ready, it basically it's very close to the ground. It helps them keep it safe from other predatory birds. We're done here, and then we have this. It's called the Indian white-eye, or it's called the Oriental white-eye. Now here, as you notice, that the bird does not have a white eye, but it just has a white ring around the eye. And this bird also has a flocking behavior. It can actually have up to 200 birds in a flock. And other than that, it can also travel with smaller birds in mixed hunting parties when they try and forage for food. This is a generalist.
Okay. Can we stop now, Abhishek?
Yes, this is the last slide. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
So here, as you can see, they love fruiting trees like banyan and mulberry. The picture on the right that you see is, I'm going to zoom in a little for you to see the picture properly here. It does have a mulberry fruit in its mouth. This is one of the pictures that I had taken when I had just gotten into bird watching. This mulberry tree was right in front of my house. So mulberry trees, banyan trees, bougainvilleas, and all these other trees are very prime trees for every one of you to try and observe them year round, so that you at least know when what bird comes to that tree. In addition to that, last thing that I'd like to say is that project that you were talking about, Vanna and Vinci. The project is something that you could do as a personal project. What you can do is map seasons of trees and also the occurrence of birds in that seasons on those trees. So what happens is, like for example, a banyan tree fruits at a particular time, and then you also have samal. You also have people. You have other birds that flower, like oleander tree, like most other trees. You can map the seasons when these trees are flowering and what all birds are coming to these flowers. In addition to that, you can map the seasons when the trees are fruiting and what all birds are coming to what all trees.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I think that should be interesting. So we will get back to you and then take a list of, even just knowing that these are the birds which we've seen and learnt about today. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting observation just to know the names of the birds that we're observing. I think that's going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think this topic can actually keep going on forever. So that's the whole problem with this topic. Anyway, so in this regard, the Indian white-eye and the Oriental white-eye also tends to prefer nectar from these trees, from the flowers, as you can see here. And in addition to that, they develop an orange-colored forehead because of the pollen that gets attached to their foreheads. That's why they have these orange-colored foreheads. That's not visible all around the year. That's only during the flowering season of particular.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And now, Manju, are you there? Manju? Is Manju there? I don't know whether Manju is there or she's in silent. But, this was very, very interesting. I think everybody's been there. Oh, so Vivek is really quick on the uptake. This is a thank you for you, Abhishek, from us, because we're not there, in person, so we can't hand out a certificate for you.
No, thank you so much. This is
This is
a
a
wonderful job.
certificate for you. And for the rest, I will get back to you. And especially about the study or just the observation that you're talking about. And I think we really had a very, very interesting session. So, you know, a lot of people had a lot of answers, and I think the rest of us learned a lot from you. And I'm going to let everybody know about your Ninox group also, of which I'm a part. So if people are interested, they can become members, and then maybe at some point of time, when once we are moving out, we will request you to take us to the
Of course.
bird sanctuary, Okla Bird Sanctuary, for a guided walk. That would be really great fun.
Yeah, it will be. And I'm sorry that this lasted forever. It's kind of a long subject for us because the even biodiversity in Delhi NCR is quite a lot to
Yeah.
cover. And I think I'm still missing out on a lot of birds anyway.
But and especially since you're passionate about it, I'm sure there's lots more that you can tell us. Maybe we'll have another session sometime. You know?
Yeah, I had 4 sessions just for this. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that's what all I had to congregate. Okay. Thank you so much for having me today and
Thank you.
for a lovely introduction and a lovely gesture of this certificate. I'm really thankful to everyone. And thank you everyone for actually joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
Abhishek.
you so much.
And thank you, everybody. We can end the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you.
Mhm.